Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so next we move on to approval of the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Catherine. Do I have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Alex. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Next, we move on to report on action taken in closed session. There was no action taken. Okay, then we move on to our regular notification that the open session is recorded and streamed on YouTube. All right, so then we move on to communications. I do not see anyone from CSCA or DTA in the audience. So then we'll move on to public comments on items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments? Okay. All right, so we have inventory.
Good evening, members. My name is Evan Turner. I've lived in Mountain View for 23 years and I have 2 children. I wanted to start tonight by thanking Trustees for the Canberra last week's board meeting during the discussion of agenda item 14.7. As a parent of a 9th grader, the reduction from 2 to 1 mandated semesters of ethnic studies in the middle of the school year affected my child. As the board is aware from my previous correspondence, many parents were confused and disappointed by the manner in which this change was communicated. So it is appreciated that Trustee Vonnegut apologised for any communication difficulties. However, from my understanding, the responsibility to inform parents was purely on the school district and the school sites themselves, not the Board of Trustees. Now, I did email directly with the superintendent and the principal of my son's school regarding these communication difficulties and CC'd the board. In both cases, rather than a final email response, the respondents chose to telephone rather than put their comments in writing. During those calls, there was some disagreement about where the responsibility lay to communicate the change. Regardless, the resulting tardiness and concomitant emails from ethnic studies teachers to parents that they were not authorised to share this information before now led parents such as myself to believe that the communication difficulties were deliberate rather than a simple oversight. Now, I'm not ignorant of the politics that goes on inside schools. Both my father and mother were public high school teachers for their entire 35-year careers. And I've heard quite a few interesting stories about what goes on behind the staff room door. But whatever those may be, I believe the community has a right to expect that public school employees should act with integrity, accountability, and professionalism. For example, I often hear members of the board make statements such as, teachers are our most valuable resource, or we should trust teachers' judgment. I would completely agree with that. But I would qualify teachers with a one-word prefix, professional. Professional teachers are our most valuable resource. And yes, we should trust professional teachers' judgment. In an interesting side note, the district personnel report in last week's board meeting included the resignation of one of the primary protagonists in the ethnic studies saga that has consumed this district over the past few years. Perhaps then that turns the page on this particular chapter, but likely not the whole book. Because Governor Newsom once again failed in his 2026-27 budget to fund MV 101. Thus, MVLA's decision to mandate 1 semester of ethnic studies for graduation is purely a choice rather than a legal requirement. Consider if the district increased student choice by offering the previously cancelled World Studies or perhaps a new AI and Society course. It would be interesting to see how ethnic studies would fare in such a marketplace of ideas. But that's all an issue for another year, or perhaps an issue for this year's Board of Trustees elections. Thank you for your time, and I hope you all have a great summer.
All right. Do we have any other public comment? Okay. All right, we'll move on to 8.0 recognitions and resolutions. So we'll move on to 8.1, which is a resolution for the recognition of Juneteenth. Do I have any comments before we consider a motion? Okay, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve resolution 2526-29, recognition of Juneteenth.
Okay, moved by Catherine,
I second.
second by Alex. Do I have any comments before we take a vote?
Yes,
Okay,
I think it's important to recognize this. It's a new holiday that was added a few years back when there was more awareness in the community and the whole United States about this inappropriate actions and behaviors of people historically. And so I think this is an important new holiday to recognize.
okay, any other comments? Okay, we ready to take a, oh, you wanted to comment?
No, I just.
Oh, okay, all right, sorry. Okay, all right, are we ready to take a vote? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right, that's 5-0. Okay, next we move on to 8.2, which is the order of election. This is our regular business, which is a specification of an election order and consolidation request.
I move that we approve resolution number 2526-13, order of elections, specifications of the election order and consolidation request.
Okay,
Second.
okay, do you have any discussion before we vote?
I have a question.
Okay,
There exists a resolution where we wanted to
If you
fix the
get
typo.
Backup material that says bias, that's what the
Okay.
correct date under number 5.
Okay, let me just double check. Perfect. Thank you.
okay. All right, any other questions or comments before we vote? Okay, so we're voting on the revised copy of the resolution. Does anyone need to see it before we vote? Okay, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's 5-0. Okay, so next is 8.3, which is also an annual resolution which authorizes delegation of authority to sign official documents and records for the 2026-2027 academic year. Do I have any discussion before a motion? Okay, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve resolution 2526-31, authorization of delegation of authority to sign official documents and records for 26-27 academic year.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Catherine, seconded by Vadim. Any discussion before we vote? Okay, all right, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right, that's 5-0. All right, next we move on to 9.0, consolidated agenda. Does anyone have any questions or comments but does not want to pull an item? Okay, seeing none, does anyone want to pull an item from the consolidated agenda? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to vote on the consolidated agenda?
I move that we approve consolidated agenda items 9.1 through 9.15.
All right.
I second.
Okay, do I have any comments before we vote? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's 5-0. Okay, next we'll move on to business action items. And we move on to 11.1, which is the California dashboard, LEA local indicators. Do I have a presentation?
That is up to you. The local indicators are part of the dashboard that we meet a certain standard. We meet all those standards. So as far as the dashboard is concerned, we meet all the local indicators.
Terry, do you have a presentation? Okay, all right. Okay, I just want to make sure. All right, so
I just had one comment.
sure, go
Before
ahead.
making an action, and that is, it's so confusing to sometimes to us board members, but certainly probably to the public, that these are local indicators, but then we also have the board indicators or the kind that are like A to G completion and this and that, which are a completely different category of indicators. So it can be confusing, but this is just a mandated thing that we have to say whether we do these certain things or not.
These show up on the dashboard,
The California
the
desk.
CDE dashboard, yes.
So
Oh.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the LEA local indicators on the California dashboard.
Okay, do I have a second?
Actually, I have a question, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, go ahead, Alex.
Um, so in this report that's attached to the agenda, there were multiple surveys mentioned, and thank you to Eric and Terry for providing the raw data. It was super interesting to see. I was curious if you saw any big discrepancies between what the students are saying, or the staff is saying, or the parents are saying, and any other call outs that we can see in this raw data.
Yes, please come to the podium, Ter, thank you.
Definitely talk about that now in helpful. That data really was paired to the LCAP, which requires stakeholder input. It gave some information for the local indicators, but that survey was not directly tied to this local indicator.
I see.
So we can talk about that now, or I plan to roll that into the LCAP presentation.
Okay, if you feel like it's more appropriate in the LCAP next agenda, that's totally fine.
All right, so are we ready to consider a motion at this point?
Oh, I already made the motion.
We didn't
Nobody
get a
seconded it.
second. Okay. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Catherine, seconded by the dean. All right, are we ready to consider, are we ready to vote on this motion, or did we have more discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So next we'll move on to 11.2, approval of the MVLA Santos High School District 2026 Local Control and Accountability Plan, otherwise known as LCAP. And I believe that Terry has the presentation, so.
Can I keep going? Okay. In regards to the last comment that I made in regards to a certain percentage of our LCFF needs to go to those 3 special populations, the state requires us to meet a 3% floor at which we spend our LCFF, our local control funding formula, on those 3 populations. For us, we have planned a little over 10% of our dollars next year that will be contributing to the actions that supports those 3 populations. So we are exceeding the floor of what the state is asking us. Down below on these slides gives you an idea of which of our actions is supporting these populations. Tier 1 instruction, in particular, constructing meaning, which is giving language frames and access to general education curriculum. Our ELD program, family engagement, which is about the parent, and 1.6, which is about the parent to teacher engagement. Counseling, extended learning opportunities, AVID is an example of that. College career readiness, that would be examples of the FAFSA, college planning, 4-year planning, interventions, safe campus, that goes with restorative practice, our multilingual language infrastructure, and again, parent engagement, but this time this goes more to the structure of parent engagement, including things like DLAC and ELAC. So all of those adds up and supports that we are meeting the state, actually exceeding the state's requirement for our increased improved services for our language learners, foster youth, and low income. That takes us to reviewing our goals. Our plan is organized around 2 broad goals. They've been holding steady for the past 3 years, or going into our 3rd year now. Goal 1 supports our inclusive, culturally responsive classrooms. This is equitable access to high quality instruction. This is about supporting an environment where students feel belonged and seen. This also includes course team alignment, co-teaching, multilingual language learners access to general education, and again, that engagement piece between the teacher, parent, and student. Goal 2 is the things outside of the classroom, our MTSS support from Tier 1, 2, and 3. This includes how our college and career and school counselors are working with our students, either preventively or intervention-wise. It includes our MTSS, like SSTs, when a student is struggling, what resources do we have to bring them in and support them with timely interventions, supporting
Repeat what you said at the beginning, just so the recording reflects what you said, if that's okay.
So Luis, per President Corns, I'm going to start from the beginning, as the first couple of slides was not being broadcasted. So if you could go back to the very first slide.
I meant at the end of your presentation. I didn't mean right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, understood. So if you would go to slide 6 for me then. Thank you. So at the heart of all of this is the data that drives our reflection and our actions. There have been some real gains this year that we would like to celebrate. First of all, our English language arts. When we look at the California dashboard, we have on almost all fronts improved in the number of points we're meeting on the dashboard. That also includes with our students with disabilities, WSWD, as well as our SED, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, have also made significant gains on the English language arts assessment. In math on the CASP, we are in blue status. That is the highest that we could reach as a district, showing significant understanding of the mathematics for our students. We also have seen gains in the mathematics of CASP with our socioeconomically disadvantaged and our language learners all improving on the mathematics as well. Our EL reclassification rate, which is referring to language learners who have reached proficiency at the high school level, has increased from 9 to 27%. Our EL graduation rate has increased over the last year. Our AP exams with students passing is a score 3, 4, or 5. We have seen increases on almost all fronts, including our SED and students with disabilities. And our wellness center has seen some more traction taking place in the center. Now, we want to be transparent that there are still gaps and still work for us to be doing as a district. Our homeless population, our students experiencing homelessness, although we have seen an increase in graduation rate with this population, we also have seen a decrease in the population reaching A to G eligibility. We have seen our population over the last year have a small uptick in our English language learners being reclassified. We are at 5%. We were at 1%. Our long-term English language learners, these are students who have not reached proficiency on the English language proficient test for more than 5 years. We have seen a decrease in some of their achievement rates. Even though our English learners have improved on multiple fronts with the CASP, we still see a significant gap that exists between language learners and the rest of the population. We have seen a decline with our students with disabilities from 40% to 38% with meeting A to G eligibility. Next to each of these, I made little comments about what this means in terms of how we're going to be adjusting or changing the actions. I'll talk about that when we get to that action page. Now, all of this is because we have, or the changes that I'm going to be sharing with you and the feedback that I'll be sharing with you in a moment has been incorporated from months of conversations with parents, students, staff, including in-person roundtables and surveys. We've talked to 11 different partner groups. We sent out a couple of different surveys, and I've paired out a couple of different themes from all of these surveys. Somebody brought up the number of responses between our staff survey and our student survey. We have over 2,000 students in our district, which means we have over 4,000 potential family guardians and staff in addition to that. And so question why the survey responses were not at a larger number of responses than we are. I think that's a great and valid question. The survey was sent out via Parent Square 2 times with very minimal input. So I sent out the student survey 2 different times to all students, as well as the staff survey 2 different times to all staff. And that's why we see the increase in responses that we have was because of that email notification. I had a brief conversation with Eric, and I'm open to feedback as well as how could we want to hear from our families. How could we get more responses? What is the platform or the means that could increase the responses back? However, based on all of the partner group conversations, councils, advisories, and surveys, the 7 themes that we saw come forward in this is 1, interest in AI, interest in having more guidance, more conversations, clarity around AI. We have an ed tech committee. They did a strong job of producing an AI handbook. That handbook has been used by several teachers and departments in coaching for our teachers. And yet communication says we need more clarity and guidance around that handbook. We have, like I said, an ed tech committee that started to do lunch and learns for teachers, as well as building out student facing asynchronous tutorials. So our charge is that we need to continue giving the guidance and the opportunities to learn together under AI. Another theme that came out was attendance concerns with the number of students that are missing classes and the impact that that has on their grades. Some teachers noted that the students that are really struggling in class are those that have a higher attendance challenge than those who are not, alluding to the fact that if you're in the seat, you're learning and you're accessing. And so what are our interventions for students who are showing high numbers of attendance absentees? Another was instructional coherence in grading. We did constructing meaning for all teachers as initial training. There's a request now that we go deeper into the implementation, as well as a high call for more aligned and consistent grading mechanisms and feedback mechanisms. Mental health was another the need for it, also feeling like there was some stigma or some confusion around the wellness centers. CTE communication, incorporating not expansion in the sense of more classes, but expansion in the sense of more opportunities for that internship work-based learning element. And then multilingual family navigation. Families that are new to the American system reporting that they are struggling to navigate a high school system, and what supports and communication and guidance can we put in place for this. Lastly, special education was another theme that came out, not only wanting to protect it and support it, but also asking for structured family feedback and communications. So with that, what is this? Actually, I'm going to pause right here. Alex, you asked for a question, and I'm going to expand on your question for our feedback slide. You asked, what did we see with some consistencies and inconsistencies between the students and the staff feedback? The main items that came out with the student feedback is grading inconsistencies was a big concern. A big call for our language learners and our multilingual learners receiving strong academic and language supports. I will say, interestingly, when you dive into the data, students that identified as being a language learner rated higher in this area than those students who didn't rate as language learners. So there's always that perception factor as well. And then the other big call is real world experiences, wanting work-based learning opportunities, field experience opportunities, internship opportunities was our three big themes, with that fourth one with attendance. Students is reported as number 4. With our staff, we did not see we saw a different perception of grading and course team alignments. Staff was reporting up in the 80s and being course team aligned and grading consistencies, as students were reporting this in the 20s and 30s. So there's a discrepancy between the two. Wellness Center was seen as very high in the 70s and 80s by staff and very clear. And the students were reporting that as a little bit fuzzy and needed more clarity around how to navigate the services and what they're for. The staff noted attendance as a big one, as well as the need for restorative practices. And maybe the students are not aware of restorative practices, but they didn't write that as a very high need at all. So those were the biggest discrepancies between the student and the staff feedback. And we can come back to that towards the end if we'd like to talk more. Okay. So what does that mean for the change in our plans for next year? We are going to continue with our 2 main goals. And under those goals, we have various actions. One of the requests from the board over the past several conversations with the LCAP is that we incorporate SMART goals into our plan, so that we're accurately communicating what we're measuring, how we're measuring it, what our total target is. So newly for each of these actions, which are specific small goals that meets the broad stroke goal, is SMART goals embedded within this. Let me turn to my note page. So with goal 1, we will be continuing with constructing meaning, which is scaffolds and access with language frames, explicit language instruction and output, and structured student engagement. But instead of just the training element that we provided all teachers for the past 2 years, we're completely trained. Now we're going to be doing a deeper alignment and usage with fidelity of constructing meaning. With course team alignment and collaboration, over the past couple of years, we've been promoting it and encouraging it. In moving into this year, we're going to be working to set up protocols and tools and collaborations of what course team alignment means, what grading calibration can look like, and giving more guidance to our course teams in terms of what does these terms mean. As we see, there's a big discrepancy of what the students are reporting as course team aligned and consistent with grades and what the teachers are. So to us, that says there needs to be some clarity of guidance and definition for these. Our co-teaching, we're going to continue to move forward with co-teaching. This has given us access. We have increased our number of students with IEPs reaching a lesser restrictive environment, or least restrictive environment. We have also seen over the past years with our increase of co-teaching, more students with disabilities reaching A to G eligibility. Some of the feedback that we have that we're going to be implementing into next year is one, putting a cap on the number of students with IEPs in a co-taught classroom, as well as offering annual training to our co-taught teams. Those were 2 highly requested items that we're responding back to. Our English language development program, we're going to continue on with supporting our ELD teachers with our teacher on special assignment who is an ELD specialist. We have seen progress in him joining this district and department with an increase of student with EL students on the CASP as well as reclassification. We are going to put in specific long-term English language instruction. Embed that into, we're still working out the whole protocol, most likely an ACT tutorial that they'll be assigned to. Unless the student has an IEP, then we're looking to embed that in their study skills program, as well as, I'll talk about this on the next one, newly reclassified EL monitoring. We're seeing our students who are newly reclassified into the Gen Ed as trending as being more of our Ds and Fs, as well as attendant issues. That tells us these students, although they're showing readiness by the LPAC, they're also needing a little bit more support and guidance as they enter that only Gen Ed curriculum. And so we'll put a monitoring progress in place for our language learners. As we go into goal 2, what the feedback has shared with us that we're going to be making adjustments. With our counselors, we heard more access was helpful and more timely intervention. So we're looking at motivational interview training. We're also looking at putting in tracking codes and monitoring of them doing tier 2, as well as if students are saying they're not able to get in contact with their counselor, then what is the means that we're making ourselves available? Are we doing Calendlies? Are we doing sign-up lists? How can we experiment with meeting that request of our students? There is a big request from our student population about work-based learning. So we're working to expand this. Every one of our CTE will be required to have a work-based learning element at least 1 a year, if not 1 each semester. We also have internships that are being built out for our med tech fields, as well as a couple of our engineering fields. We're also looking into next year, building out with industry partners, what we're calling summer internships. And these are 2 to 3 week opportunities for students to go into an industry that they're interested in and do shadowing and internship opportunities. So again, we know that beyond the 4 walls is what can truly inspire a student. I've had conversations with avid teachers that have shared internships is what changed their student. They had a student that was a little bit squirrely. Their sophomore year, they went into an internship, or their junior year, they went into an internship, and that just flipped it. They were motivated, they were focused, and that was the trajectory that that was the fuel that they needed to change that trajectory for us. So we want to supply this. MTSS, we're as a district goal going to be working together, district and sites, to build this out even more. This includes restructuring our SST as well as being very clear on our definitions, including and also looking into what are our tier twos that we don't have in place that we need to be able to respond to the attendance or the mental health or the academics. I already mentioned about the AI elements that have been newly added into Action 2.6. CTE, I mentioned that we're working to expand that work-based learning and high-quality teaching, building out internships as well as industry certifications within the fields. So it's not just another class that a student is participating in. It is a highly comprehensive work experience that they get to have in that CTE course and pathway. Parent communications, we heard from our ELD families that the navigation through high school could be very confusing or not sure who to go to get help. So we're going to be building out family workshops to support that element. And lastly, supporting our students with disabilities. Families have said that communication has been sometimes delayed or confusing for them and what they're asking for in services. We have a director of special education that started in the district this year. She hit the ground running and has been doing an amazing job and will be supporting this important item for us as well. So thank you for having the overview of what LCAP is. A quick overview of our data. I know the LCAP plan that is posted on their webpage as well as on the board docket goes much more into detail on the data. This was just a broad strokes overview, as well as the changes for next year, in particular with our action plans. And so with that, President Corns, would you like me to go back to the first couple of slides? Okay. And this
This
is
is just
for
for public transparency because the public recording couldn't hear you. Is that correct? Do I have confirmation that it was not recorded? Yeah, okay. All right. So just for public transparency, if you could just go over it again. Thank you so much.
Yes, due to the microphone being off for the first two slides, I will reiterate to make sure everybody got the full overview. So my first slide was presenting that I'm bringing to the board our 2026 to 2027 local control and accountability plan. And I reiterated that this is the final year of a 3-year cycle for this particular plan with its 2 broad goals and various action items. To talk for a moment about what the LCAP is. This is a strategic plan that is required by California for all LEAs or all school districts. And that plan is to hold 3 main items. One, that it sets measurable goals of what the school or what the district is working to improve in terms of student achievement, engagement, climate, access, outcomes. It also adds an element of funding. How are we using our local control funding formula dollars to support the actions to meet those goals? And lastly, it requires accountability. What is the data that we're showing for improvement, as well as what is the reflection that we're showing for what's been working and what are areas that we still need to work on? The LCAP is for all students, but it also specifically targets 3 important student groups. Our English language learners, of which we have 6.7% in our district, our foster youth, in which we currently have 5 students as foster youth. So we do not show data as in reference to foster youth to be careful that we're not identifying any student, and low income socioeconomically disadvantaged students, in which the district has about 17% of that. And I believe everybody has got the full presentation. So thank you, trustees.
Thank you very much. That was a very informative presentation. And I also want to let you know, Terry, that if you have a presentation and please let me know so that I can make sure that you have the opportunity to speak, because what you have to say is incredibly important for the board and for the public to hear. So thank you.
Thank you and understood.
All right. So Catherine?
I had great couple of comments. Great. Thank you for the presentation. One is, may the board please have a copy of the AI manual?
Absolutely.
Or is it somewhere on the website that we could easily access?
It's on the website. I thought I shared it with you all several months ago, but after this meeting, I'll make sure Eric has it. I'll also include the website. Bob Fishstrom built out a beautiful website that supports all the work that the Ed Tech Committee has been doing with AI.
Yep.
A lot that we're proud of, but we're also hearing people saying, where is this? So more publication is important.
Right, we're going to be discussing that a lot more as a board, so it's been mentioned in the past, but now we need to read the manual and look at all the resources and start collecting our thoughts on how we're going to proceed with our whole AI plan for the district. Well, the other thing is the 10% compared to the 3% in terms of the funding. And you put down all the categories of resources that we're using towards.
Our contributing action.
Yes.
Correct.
So do you count all of the EL program and I can't read it from here. For instance, all the Safe Campus money, 24,000, that's not all spent for the whole district. How do you decide what percentage of it applies to this plan?
So this was in reference to some training as from legal in terms of disciplinary actions, as well as ripple effects, which is an interventions service. In the reflection, we noted that there was a decline in the usage of ripple effects, which is one of our primary restorative justice platforms. And so in the reflection, we talked about needing to work with our site administration team of, do we want to continue with the ripple effects? And if not, then what is our restorative practice options?
Okay, so in other words, this obviously isn't the total of all the money spent in any one of these categories, but these are the specific actions or trainings or whatever you did that relate directly to the LCAP plan. Okay, that was my other question. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah.
Team?
So thank you, and thank you for providing the data. So trustees were all given raw data to look at. I had a few hours to spend on it. First, I looked at the number of respondents. So as you mentioned, it's low.
Yeah.
You said 2,000 students, by the way. Was it misspoken? Because we have 45 in the district, 4,500 in the district.
You're right. So we have 21 per school site. So it should have been 4,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So like.
It's pretty significant.
And how many staff do we have from across the district?
We have roughly 240 teachers and probably the same in classified.
Okay, so about a
And
third.
mostly our teachers, that out of that 85,
Yeah.
probably 79 was teachers.
Okay, yeah. So teachers mostly participated, it seems, or at least like a third, right? But among students, only 215 and like 53 parents, which is a lot lower than even MVLA survey. So I would reach out to perhaps MVLA folks and find out how they can get 600 responses for their survey.
Yep.
I'm happy to post it on WhatsApp groups where parents hang out, since I'm a parent in the district. So I have access and definitely can help out. So looking at the data, let me just mention things that I found, and then I'll ask a question. For course consistency focus area, I did notice that staff, I got about 73% of positive responses from staff versus students was about 34%. And students who need specialized instruction, like, 504 plan, etc., was even lower, 27%. 56 students agreed or strongly agreed that there was consistency versus 73 that disagreed or strongly disagreed. There was also a notable difference between school sites. At Mountain View, the positive response was 39%, at Los Altos was 24%. So something worth looking into. And then there was a significant drop. 36% of ninth graders thought there was consistency. And only 25% of 11th graders thought so too. So given this data, I wonder, do we have a problem of staff versus students not being aligned on what consistency means? Because there seems to be on a different spectrum. This is not about like, do we have consistency? Do we not have consistency? How we solve it? It's not that. You can't address an issue if you don't agree on how to define the issue. Doesn't my question make sense?
It absolutely does. Sitting in on the student advisory meetings, I do feel the students are requesting a very high level of consistency, including what projects and assignments are being done, that assessments are being taken roughly the same amount and within the same period of time, the same number of homework, where the staff, I'm gonna, speak from my perception right now, feels that alignment would be, we're teaching the same standards, we have the same sequence, roughly the same pacing. We want to start having conversations about common summative assessments. Some of our course teams are there, some of them are not there. But I would say as a staff, we don't want to get to the level that our teachers are lockstep. Some of them are because they work that closely together and that's right. But some, we want to have autonomy to where you can have a different slide deck than you to be able to get to reach the same learning goals. And you may have a different project than you to reach those same learning goals, as long as you're reaching the same learning goal and the work level and homework load is equal access. And so I wouldn't disagree with you at all in saying there's a slight difference or maybe a significant difference than from what students are feeling should be aligned. Could I just, Mr. Volta, is that what you're hearing too in the MSAC meetings? Okay.
I have a clarifying question of the numbers of people that you got feedback from.
Yep.
You mentioned that you went to 11 partner groups. Does your surveys and survey responses include those 11 partner groups? But those are 11 groups such as our family partnership, our coffees with the principal, student council. Those are other groups that you went to included to those numbers there.
Outside of those numbers,
And
correct.
it was more face-to-face.
Yep.
And clarifying questions there. Okay, and that's added into your information.
Correct. And oftentimes the partner groups are representatives of certain demographics within the staff or student population. So even though our numbers are low and I would love for them to be higher, the goal was to have a pretty comprehensive conversation by touching both surveys, opportunities, and partner groups. Thank you for clarifying that.
And just another clarification for the board, how would you characterize the amount of input you got this year based upon what our actions and the effectiveness of our actions compared to maybe last year? Just the amount of input that you've received. About the same?
No, 3-4 times. And I would appreciate actually, Mr. Volta, you prioritizing that we need to have more input, more family input, more student input into the LCAP, So increase the partner groups, did surveys for the first time.
I wasn't looking for the latter part. I just want to make sure it's
Okay.
clear that we
Well,
are progressing
Yeah,
towards
well,
getting
but
information.
it's because of your guidance and requesting this.
Plus one on community engagement. I've been, as parents reach out, I've always reminded them that it's their voice and they should take all the opportunities. So I appreciate that survey went out. Anyway, and I hope the rest of the board members can help you distribute that survey or encourage people to fill it out, because we'd like to have the voice. And I'm also glad to hear that we need to figure out how to align on what the expectations for consistency is before we actually start thinking about what are the right way of implementing that consistency. I think that should come first. Maybe you guys have seen it before. I realized it only recently, that there is a lack of common understanding of what it means.
Thank you.
I've also seen some data on the second focus area, wellness and mental health, and it's also similar, where the staff seems to be highly positive about the services, while students, especially specialized students. So I did analysis based on students who, general population, as well as just students who indicated that they're using the services through participation in one of the specialized needs. Their response was only 52%. So, because I think it's important to look into that category of students who actually use the services and benefit from them rather than overall.
Yeah.
So their response was lower than an overall population.
May I add onto that a little bit?
Yeah.
Thank you. While I agree with you, that the numbers are not as high as we would like, and I think it suggests that we do a deeper dive. We have, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, seen an uptick in students knowing how to referring themselves, or referring a friend. And so even though there's still room for improvement, there has been improvement from 4 years ago when, as we're rolling out our wellness service program, students weren't even sure how to make a referral or what a referral even meant. So room to continue to
Yeah.
grow.
I would venture to say that I'm doing it carefully, right? This is not, I think, the role of a board to provide advice, nor am I have any expertise in this area, but focusing on proactive engagement and reaching out to the students, I would imagine that would play a bigger role. So rather than, allowing the students to know how to get help, really having a system in place that where an responsible adult is proactively reaching out and making themselves available to the students. It's up to them to take, of course, that opportunity, but at least they're young adults. They have this choice, but making sure that students feel seen and heard, and that somebody out there is constantly looking out and wondering what might be going on, or recognizing both challenges as well as perhaps some of the successes. And I mean, the data is there.
Yeah.
We see it on so much data, right? So enabling counselors to identify this data and be proactive at reaching out to the students to compliment them on something that's positive, and also to demonstrate that they're there to help them would definitely, I would love to see how that makes a difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. The reason why I brought up the student referral is our staff goes through annual training on mental health awareness, how to see signs, how to approach, and how to do warm handoffs. And I mean, this has been our annual. 3 or 4 years ago, the number of referrals by staff compared to students were significant. Now we're seeing the number of referrals of students incline. What that tells us is that we're communicating to our students, your mental health is important. If you're not feeling well, here's how you're getting resources. And students are feeling comfortable and they know how to get resources. It's not that we're seeing our staff numbers necessarily decreasing, It's that we've done a lot of communication to our students about how they can advocate and access for themselves. And it takes both, right? We really want to work on this with community, but our staff, we communicate, you're the first responders. You are the boots on the ground that can see when somebody is starting to seem a little off. And here's ways that you can approach it.
Okay. And my last comment, LCAP performance data, academic performance data is CASP based, correct?
The CASP is from the California dashboard.
Right, but the LCAP, when we talk about achievements of students, we are using
Oh,
CASP.
CASP.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So recently we've identified, at least I have identified, that CASP data is potentially highly unreliable, right? Because of participation, because of lack of accountability for the how students take, even if they participate, what they answer on the so. But putting that aside, if we are using that as a data on which we evaluate how we are doing, I would love to see some guardrail metrics. It's true, like I have seen that across, for example, Hispanic population, we've seen a 61% increase in math performance. Fantastic. At the same time, a drop of 83 points. Sorry, I said percent, 61 points, and a drop of 83 points at Los Altos. So in overall, let me just get the data correctly. Overall, in, for example, reading, meets or exceeds expectations. So there was a report on meets or exceeds. At Mountain View, we went from 85% meets and exceeds collectively, right, across all demographics, to 80%. So in 23, I think 22, 23, if I remember the years, it was 85 and now it's 80. At Los Altos, it went from 84 to 78 to 79. So we should absolutely focus, like I mentioned in the last meeting, with priority-wise, we should focus on groups where we can make the biggest impact. You know, we can definitely make a much bigger impact in any group, whether by socioeconomic status, by race as a demographic, by where the group is in 50% or 60%, we can drive it higher than driving something that's already in the 90, right?
Right.
Yet we cannot do this without having guardrails and knowing how the rest of the students are doing. And overall, I see a decline in reading and writing. So just want to encourage you to look at the guardrail metrics to see what's happening overall.
Thank you.
So big plus one, I had the same observation as Vadim when we reviewed our SPSA SEPSA plans. While our efforts are paying off with a sort of like different populations that have challenges, we are seeing decreases in the overall or maybe other groups which are already much higher. But the guardrails must exist and make sure that while we're increasing outcomes for some groups, we are not dropping outcomes for others. We don't need to increase them, but we need to maintain them. That's the meaning of guardrails. Interestingly enough, the same feedback came up in Family Partnership Council earlier in the year. So it's in your presentations as well.
Correct.
So that's one. Second, I wanted to make a comment on the survey data. So first of all, big thanks for putting all of this together, all of this feedback. I really appreciated seeing the high-level themes that staff identified. And I sort of took a little bit of a different lens to Vadim's in analyzing this data. I was very curious, not only about the survey selections, but about the open-ended responses, because typically those reveal more details about the themes and what actually is going really well or like is going wrong that we need to address. And I want to elevate a few things that were all included in the slides you have, but out of like, I guess, 6 out of the themes that you have on the slide, I wanted to elevate 3 in particular, as I think they very strongly relate to the district priorities that we discussed in our last study session. So the strongest theme I noticed was around consistency and alignment in the student academic experience. So +1 to Vadim's comments that we have to really define what it is. And I personally would be curious to see how we define it. Of course, we got to balance student expectations and what staff freedom and like ability to do what they do best, right? But basically what I saw in the open-ended responses is grading consistency, different expectations across teachers teaching the same course, significant variation in classroom experience depending on which teacher a student has. And I see that a lot. And like when parents come and talk to me, like this teacher did this or this teacher did that. And so definitely that's a big priority. The second theme that stood out was how frequently students raised interest in more career-connected learning opportunities. And to me, Eric, that relates to one of the priorities you suggested in the study session about how to invest beyond academics and how people have more career opportunities and post-high school opportunities, create differentiation for college, CTE, all of these things, which again is a big theme here. So I saw people talk about internship and career pathways and dual enrollment and financial literacy and practical preparation for life after high school. So very clear signal here that students really care about that. And I know parents do as well. So, and then the third theme, was sort of this recurring feedback around academic support systems, counseling, both academic counseling, but even college counseling, access to that guidance. And there seems to be a lot of variation in how students and parents experience these services. So I think that's another place to really dig into and understand how do we provide better services there and better support. And hopefully you guys also pay attention to the open-ended responses. It really provides sort of like a really interesting window on the people who are willing to say more. Of course, balancing with the sort of like more structured survey responses, but as an overall picture, it's always enriching. So thank you. Agreed.
Wait, yeah. Esme, did you want to speak?
I just, it's more of a format thing that, I appreciated slide 6 and, slide 8 and 9 in terms of the specificity outlined, for what's, triggering a switch or a change in direction for each of these items. So, just thank you, Terry, and, appreciate the gains outlined on slide 6.
Okay, well, I don't really, a lot has been said and really, I would agree with a lot about making sure that we continue to focus on if you could go back to the slide where you had the SMART goals, I think that was very important. And I think also, the point that was made about, perhaps communicating, I know you had a coffee with the principal, but I think, Foundation also like has it in their in the principal's newsletter, and I think that is how a lot of parents receive information. And also, I know Foundation actually has it like multiple times, so that if you could coordinate with the principal on doing it, like because I think the first time maybe parents don't see it, it's in a long list of things, but it gradually kind of reaches their notice. But I just if I recall how Foundation does it, it appears several times.
Yeah.
And I think it just requires that level. And also I think,
Noted.
no, and also to that point is having a dollar amount as well. If this is a lot of money that we're spending as a district. And I think, I don't remember what you wrote, but I think saying we're spending this amount of money and the foundation is always very clear, we're spending, this amount of money on this. And your input actually drives, in part how the money is spent. So I think that I hope would help more parents and students realize that this is actually something where they their input actually matters, because right now we have data, as you said, from 11 groups. Those groups are important, and we have the surveys. But obviously, if we had a lot more survey data, then we would know from the people that we don't hear from all the time. Because people who are involved in those partner groups are already really involved parents, right there, and students are taking the time to be in a partner group. And I think the purpose of the LCAP is to help those students who are actually struggling. So those students may not necessarily understand that I can respond to the survey and then my needs can actually be met better. So I think especially for students with disabilities or English language learner families, there's clearly a disconnect that this actually drives what, and I'm also saying this sort of a PSA because I think spoken English is easier to understand. This actually drives how we help you. So
you.
I think that's a really important message and just one I wanted to say, even though it's because we used a lot of, for the LCAP itself, there's a lot of, and by necessity, a lot of very complicated words that we use. But I think at its most basic, to +1, what everyone else said, is what do the students actually need? And hearing from families and students literally drives the survey. So that's my comments. Moving on to Catherine.
Well, because of what everybody else said, I want to say +1 here, there, and everywhere. But I also wanted, two other thoughts came to me during this and during the mental health one. We've talked a lot about, support for a student. And I've asked several parents or students themselves, or even a teacher, who is this student's person, grown up on this campus? And somebody will say, Matt, the driver of this security van or whatever. Or somebody will say, so-and-so, my Spanish teacher or whatever. So, and almost beyond communication, we almost need a marketing campaign. Who's your person? You know what I mean? And I think there's several other categories in where we're talking about communication. Can we go beyond, in theory, communication, which is almost more bland or delivering information, to marketing, whatever kind of thing we're trying to get across? And you can't do them all at once, but you can take one thing like the one-on-one with an adult and make it a campaign of marketing and make it jazzy, present it in posters, present prizes for it. I mean, market it, and sell it. And then the same, but then you could do that with really any other idea you want to do. And so maybe we need is there a position on our staff for a marketing expert? I'm kidding, but it's true. It's amazing that marketing can be used in everything. And this is a case that it could be.
Thank you. So President Corns and members of the board, we are seeking board approval on the LCAP plan tonight.
Are we ready to call a question, or does anyone else have any more comments? All right, okay, let's call a question.
I move that we approve the LCAP plan.
Okay, do I have a
second.
second? All right, moved by Catherine, seconded by Alex. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right, that's 5-0. Okay, next we move on to 11.3, which is the district budget for the 2026-2027 school year. And here's Mike for the presentation.
It's wonderful to follow Terry Fott in Educational Services. By design, LCAP is what drives stuff. It's the local control accountability plan. And then we look at budget after that, because the budget is what supports all those programs and people that staff it. And so we're excited to share that with you. We promise we won't go through every single line item of the budget. But I do want to reference the hard copies that were available last week. This has also been posted on our district website, which has a lot of the detailed information. Intentionally and purposefully, our presentation is very high level, broad brushstrokes of the district, as well as the underlying assumptions that are within it. And then, of course, we can go into any details we want, but that'll be the thrust of direction of our presentation. So with that, we'll get going. You'll see a very familiar format. We try and keep these consistent during our 4 budget presentations throughout the year. So changes or key points you can identify. We always like to start with our goals. Just a reminder that, this is the way we support the district schools and being fiscally responsible and budgeting, providing personnel and facilities that optimize teaching and learning. Reminder of the AB 1200 process. Again, this is just for reference. You've seen this in other slide presentations. We are at the beginning of a new budget cycle. So even though we're ending one school year and one fiscal year, this is really the beginning of the new budget year and new budget cycle, adopting our budget by June 30th. It tracks with the state government as well, because they're in the midst of adopting their budget for the new fiscal year as well. Again, I said high level. So big takeaway. Hey, MVLA, how big is your budget? Well, revenue just under 160 million has come in this fiscal year. Expenditures less than that at just over 157 million, creating an increase to the fund balance of $2,750,860. That is gross, it's unrestricted, it's restricted, it's one-time money, it's ongoing revenue, everything in there. Elvis will get to a few slides later, breaking down some of that in more discrete chunks, but the big picture takeaway, this number grows every year. Some revenue highlights. Total revenue growth is 1.7%. And I think it's important to remember that number, especially how small it is relative to prior years and historical trends when we look at total revenue growth. And we'll talk later about what it costs just to keep everything the same and turn the page from one year to the next and what the additional revenue is needed for that. We are community funded. We know that. We emphasize it all the time. Our drivers and property tax growth in the budget format that we're required to do, and Terry alluded to this, it still refers to it as LCFF sources, because that is where the state acknowledges all those local property taxes. You see that line item of revenue growing by just under 5 million or 3.8%. And so property tax revenue, we're projecting to grow restricted property tax by 4%. Unrestricted, which is a smaller component of that, is 0%. The minimum state aid that we've gotten the same exact dollar amount since 2013. With the fair share reduction takeaway, that's for another time. Eric, I think, might remember that. That was pre-LCFF. That's how long ago that was. That still's acknowledged in that same line. So we have certain elements of that LCFF line item of revenue that stay constant, stay flat. Property taxes drive it. Just giving you a little bit of, when you unpack me here, say, well, I thought property taxes went up 4%, but Mike, you're saying 3.8% growth, the total growth was 1.7. All those are accurate because they're all pieces of the same puzzle, but more and more as a district, and when we talk with our staff and the associations we work with, our parents, I think that total revenue growth is important because that's what's available to help continue to fund our programs and to make adjustments as necessary. Foundations already mentioned, I think, earlier in terms of surveys, and we appreciate their ongoing support of the district with an amount comparable with this year. Shoreline, we do receive money through the city of Mountain View with an agreement with the city, as do Mountain View Wisman. As you probably heard, property values in the commercial category, commercial real estate, is taking a hit, especially out in the Shoreline Regional Park community. So this $4 million number is $900,000 less than what we received in the current year. And that reflects a significant decrease in revenue that the city of Mountain View is receiving this year in the Shoreline area. That percentage decrease is what impacts the amount the city provides us next year, right? So that's just a formula. It's what's actual tax returns, and that drives the revenue we get through the city in that category. But it's indicative of what's going on in an area heavily driven by commercial properties and a lot of unsecured properties, which are much more volatile. So a few highlights of what's going on there. And then you can see we do get federal, state, local revenue, which have swings depending upon the governor's budget, which has a significant amount of one-time money in there that we'll mention later on, increase the special ed revenue. So you see some of those adjustments. Not huge dollar amounts on $157 million or $159 million budget, but still we pulled out those high level areas and changes. On the expenditure highlights slide, the way we build the budget is we take our current year we roll it over, and then we make changes, we add, we make deletions. And so continuing all the programs we had this year, personnel costs, this is consistent with prior years. That's the bulk of what the district's spending dollars on, salaries and benefits. 83% of the budget. It's good things, good staff, good people. It just means when you look at non-personnel costs and where you want to make changes, it's a tinier sliver of the budget at our disposal. We look at programs and staff accordingly, right? Middle college, we know enrollments decline. Palo Alto has not participated in that program anymore. So there's retirement at middle college. We're not replacing that position, right? Because there's not a need for that same level of staffing, as is one example. You know, a special ed is highlighted here too. We look at program changes, needs of students, needs of support staff. We make adjustments there to make sure we're providing those services. Or two examples we highlight there. We reference the average salary benefit costs of certificated personnel. We are in the midst of hire a lot, like the Benson tells me, of teachers for next year. Right, but sometimes we don't know their final costs until they're onboarded, placed on the salary schedule. So this number you see here, just under 260,000, represents that average salary benefits cost. That's a helpful number to keep in mind as we go throughout the year. We use it in negotiations, we use it when we look at somebody goes out on leave and we have to hire a teacher to replace. If we need to add staff and more, if we reduce staff, then how much is the dollar saving? So not an insignificant dollar amount there. And then you can see the other assumptions, statutory benefits for both health and welfare and our retirement pensions are significant as well. Those haven't changed year to year very much, but we highlight the cost because they're probably different than what goes on outside the public sector in terms of employer costs for retirement. And with that, I'm going to step aside as Elvis gets into some more detailed information over that budget.
So yeah, so Mike went on to talk about the unrestricted side of it. Restricted side, monies, this year, governor's revision, we were told that special ed got a funding increase of $422 extra next year for ADA, which is an average daily attendance. So we went from this year from 918 to 1,340 per ADA next year. Also, we get some more one-time money. The one-time money, again, it's all in the restricted side, which is the state revenue. That is about 3.96 million that we're getting next year. So we decided to put it good. It's good time to put it in the budget, in the revenues, but not to put any expense on it because we're getting the money. There's no plan yet of what we're going to spend it. So it's well to put it in the budget and let's start making a plan of what we want to do with that money. So again, this is the positive side is even though Shoreline went down by 900,000, we got some more money in other places to help the budget. This includes the 2% raise for the next year also. So certificated and classified salaries already have the 2% raise added on to this. As we mentioned earlier, medical benefits, we put a 5% for both Cigna and Kaiser because it's sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. Sometimes we have 1 year Cigna goes up, Kaiser goes down, or vice versa. So it's always a good number to have. 5% is always about kind of where we land. At the same time, it's we're meeting our obligations because if you look on the bottom of our next slide, unrestricted, even though revenue went down on the locals, we still have $180,000 left in there. And on the restricted side, you'll see $2.5 million increase. Again, that number includes the 3.96 million that we're getting on one-time monies. So even though you may say, well, how come we don't see the 3.96? It's again, we're spending down old money that we have in order to keep going with the new money we're having. So that's the thing. It's always spend old money that we have first in, first out. Because you don't want to hold that money on and then have to give it back to the state. Our philosophy is always spend the money that we have first and spend it all out. And again, the next slide is the fund balances. So you'll see on restricted, that's a healthy fund balance still. Unrestricted is healthy. Restricted, you see a higher fund balance if you see in the past. The reason why Mike and I and Eric met, and a lot of it had to do with the donation money that we always account for, that we always try to expense it out because of our accounting purposes to account for it. So we figured this year we're doing something different, so we don't see those big swings every year that you guys see that we have to talk about, and on our actuals and first year, those big swings of, well, this money we have to account for it, it's moving, swinging. We decided to put it on the bottom so that it's restricted. It's there, it's everyone's donation accounts, it doesn't go away, everyone sees it. So there's no more, we're trying to stop the swings from being happening every year. This is the cost 1%, so kind of it's always helpful to look at when negotiations happens. This is the numbers we go by. This is our reserves, 17%. You'll see what it's 26,696,310. Our current reserves is just shy of 100,000. So if you want to look at it percentage wise, it's at 16.7%. We're up. We also have one-time money that will help backfill that. Again, we have the money that the revenue we accounted for. There is no expense to it. So if we need it, we have money that can go into there to help backfill the 17% as we need it.
And I would even add to that, if property taxes come, slightly higher than we're budgeting, right, that changes all these numbers to the positive too, in terms of that surplus, like that. Fund balances that go to reserve are as well. So like any good budget, this is the plan. This is based upon the most up-to-date accurate information, and it's going to change. This graph just indicates what's going on with enrollment. We have a demographic study that was completed in 2024. It's on our website. It informs what we do when we look at enrollment and staffing projections. Really what this tells us is our enrollment stayed pretty flat. If you go back and look at the demographic projection, it actually showed us starting to decline. It was one projection it had, but if housing development came to fruition at half of the full build out of what the city had in the pipeline, enrollment would increase. And we're kind of between those two curves that go in opposite directions. Why this is important is because our funding is not based upon student enrollment. Our funding is based upon property taxes. And so we look at this in terms of what do you do for staffing, and we're holding staff constant. So our budget assumptions include no increases, no decreases for certificated staffing that's tied to student enrollment. And so we continue to monitor that. We work very closely with Ed Services starting in December, if I'm not mistaken, Terry, where we look at all the 8th graders in our apartment districts, enroll them. We look at, they have a 10-year historical trend of how many students go from, matriculate from one grade to the next, how many private school requests do we get? And so we monitor that over time. So, as the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders come to our high schools, and depending on how many students graduate, I know we were all at one of many graduations recently. You saw how many students walk across that stage and get a diploma. It's not always the same number. So if the number that leaves is bigger than the number that enters, your enrollment overall is down. So long story short, enrollment staying steady, relatively flat. So staffing stays relatively flat. I alluded to historical trends in total revenue, and this slide just reminds us of what recent history has shown in terms of the district revenue, mostly driven by local property taxes. Some of those spikes, especially the first column, that was COVID, state money, federal money to buy a lot of stuff, really caused a double-digit increase that year, as well as some subsequent years. But really you see a trend in recent years where that total number is less than we've had in recent memory, right? And so we were trying to maintain and do those same things where the pie is getting bigger each year, but it's not growing by as much as it used to. And we do provide all that breakdown, unrestricted, restricted, to see how that is a balancing act. Some of those funds like Golden State Pathways Partnerships, CTE funding, the one-time money from the state, that is restricted money, which has certain categories of uses, strings attached, so to speak, right? But that's where we always look at what will that plan be. Let's make sure we have a plan for how we spend that money down.
Another historical spreadsheet. It's more of a special education. So this is where we're at current year. So what that means also in 26, 27 with more money, that could mean that the general fund will contribute less. So that's kind of more historically about special has been doing. This is a multi-year projection. This is our 3 years obligation that we do. The out year of 27-28 has a 3.5% increase in property taxes, and the outer year is a 3%. Kind of a cautious number, but we feel that's better than kind of what market's at right now. It's kind of like Mike said earlier. Commercial hasn't gone up yet. It's kind of level, went down this year and it's leveled down. So even though residential helps us go up, without that commercial kind of keeps us at a very flat rate. But you know, if there's some improvement, again, we'll come back at first interim, we'll edit these numbers again, because that's when we have more numbers from the tax assessor's office from the city. Here's going out further out, the multi-year projection. This is what it looks like. Like Mike said earlier, just to turn the page is about a 2% increase every year, just on salaries and then just on employment. So every just return is about 1.7 about there, with some people we count for 2%. Just to turn the page every year on step increases and what's going on right there. As far as staffing, every year we staff accordingly. We work good with HR and Terry's office of staffing to what we need. So we just keep going as we go and make sure we have everything that we have. CPI for the 27-28 year, this is on perishables and supplies, it's a 3.18 increase, and the out year is 2.76. Again, that's all in both the supplies, operating costs, so that's kind of where you see those numbers go up. Next slide is the outer years. Again, you can see that fund balance tends to go up. Again, once we settle, the first year is say 180,000. It's a 2% raise for next year. And the outer years, again, this is all based on the 3.5% property tax increase and the 3% on the outer years. This is all fund spreadsheet. You guys have this. Again, I'm going to highlight it's adult education. We work very close with adult education. We've also given more grants. We recently got another grant for I think the consortium is 2.4 million that she's going to get through for some more pathways. Again, that's going to get split up with her as well. So she's getting more money through pathways. So that's and that continues to grow. Cafeteria still self-funded. There is no contribution from the general fund over to it. We're getting enough money to zero out pretty much the cafeteria, and also bond will end this next year. So we have totally expensed all the bond. A lot of the construction will be nearing the end of it. And I know we will spend down some of the money some of the one-time money that we got from the state, which will be in Fund 210, which is the building fund. So all of that's good news that some of the construction starts slowing down and campus will be fully going.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for highlighting the Metro bond stuff. Doesn't mean the projects are done, which means the original bond funding is exhausted, and then it starts to draw down some of the school facility program money, of which this is aside. We got word late last week that the state approved another 1.9 million in reimbursable dollars for our modernization new construction project. So that's obviously the positive, not reflected in any of this because it was late breaking news, but it just shows you as we spend those dollars investments we make to recapture that money available to the state, it benefits the district and will allow us to do projects that either exceed this original scope or projects that weren't part of the original bond program. But this is not a bond presentation, but it's an example of one of those funds that are outside the general fund that we take a look at. So we are requesting approval of the budget tonight. The state has agreed in principle on the legislature's budget. The Senate and Assembly agree. They want to get paid by June 30th. So by the statutory deadline, I think of June 11th, to provide a 72-hour window of time for people to review. And I think today was the deadline. I don't know if they took action or not. They probably did because they want to get paid. They agree on a budget, and now they actually do the final negotiation together. The good news for MVLA is many of the things we include in the budget, the 3.96 million in one-time funds, the 1.6 million additional in special ed, Elvis referred to it in the per student number. As the legislature was going through it, they were keeping that in there. And we have a lot of advice coming from food services, CASVO, AXA, California School Boards Association, keeping us up to date on what's going on. Those proposals were not touched. That's sometime they were proposed to be higher than that, so they're confident in those. But we'll take a look at the final state budget, incorporate that as we enter the first interim. We'll look at our property tax revenue. We didn't show you because it's more details than you want to know probably for this presentation. But we have that monthly report we get from the assessor's office. What's the gross roll growth in property values, and the 25, let's see, going into 25, 26 and going into 26, 27, almost identical monthly amounts. And so that's why we feel very confident of the 4% number for next year. And then as we start getting numbers next year for the following year, we'll update the multi-year projection accordingly. Like we already mentioned, once we hire and place anyone on the salary schedule, those figures get updated once we learn if people who are taking leaves all of a sudden in the fall. We include that in the budget. So we'll make those adjustments. And then we close the books. We'll be back here September 15th prior to that to provide you with the unaudited financial actuals for 25, 26. We'll see the final ending balances. Those become the beginning balances for 26, 27. So we make that adjustment and we keep on rolling along. So this is your cheat sheet when you want to look at all the other standardized account code structure. That's what SACS acronym stands for. All the different forms, it lines up with the different funds. We have a great team, and credit to all of them that go into putting this budget together. And that concludes our presentation. We do have time for comments and or questions before the board takes action.
So thank you very much for a very informative presentation. I really appreciate your coming up when it's your turn to give your presentation. So thank you for that. So does anyone have any questions or comments? Catherine?
Just a couple. Thank you for the presentation as usual. CalSTRS and CalPERS are huge and we don't get a choice. The government tells us what those costs for the post-employment plans are. Do they have any projection of when they might raise those? And would that affect that, that would affect our 3-year rolling things, plans?
Correct. Yeah, it's harder by statute to change CalSTRS. There's requirements that if you change the rate you pay in, you have to change the benefit you get. So that's pretty locked in and consistent, but we do get updates. The CalSTRS has a board and they meet several times a year. CalPERS changes that number every year, and we get guidance on what it's likely going to be, estimates, and once they take action, what it'll actually be. So in the multi-year projections assumption page, you'll actually see slightly different numbers in the future years for CalPERS. Most of that we get from school services guidance, but yeah.
Okay, then my other question is, when Elvis is explaining how you changed some things from unrestricted to restricted or whatever, so you didn't have to shift things around or have a big balance this one time and a lower balance the other. I didn't quite get that. So could you run a little bit of that by us again?
So that's the donation account that school side have that they get. I think it's 1 point. Let me look at my sheet. Donations or other restrictions about $1.9 million. So that's money that's called for that the school sites get. It's both school sites, also this the district. So it's all that money that people donate to us. And so we did this year instead of always including it as an expenditure in it every year in the team that's doing every time we do first interim, because we usually come to adopt the budget saying we spent the money the prior year and there's nothing left. So this what we did differently is, well, we know we're going to spend it, so might as well let it drop to the bottom line so that you see that the fund balance is there, the money sitting there. You don't see that swing every year that, well, here we go again, first interim, there's $2 million in supplies that we have to account for, but we're not really spending it. Just the way we have to account for the money that we have. It's more of a tracking.
Okay. And it only applies to donations.
Donation.
Okay, that's the part I didn't.
And there's a spirit in which donations and money of that sort is given to be spent this year, right? Mm-hmm. So there is strong accounting guidance that you would plan that money's spent, right, and zeroed out. And so that swing we're trying to avoid is, we know not all that money's spent every year. So rather than showing us expenditure, then it's not an expenditure. We have to explain, well, why'd you guys expect to spend 4 million and you only spent 2 million, right? And then why did the ending balance grow from a small amount, to why did it become bigger? So we're trying to make it easier to understand for the community, public at large, even the school sites, the unions of, we won't book it as expenditures until it's spent. Internally, we'll have to do some different things to track it, because when you book it as an expenditure, it's an easier way to see that carryover amount, but you guys don't need to worry about unless you want to learn accounting mechanisms. But that's the gist of it.
All right, does anyone else wish to ask questions or make a comment? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion?
I motion that we approve the budget.
I
Okay.
second that.
Motion by Alex, seconded by Catherine. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's 5-0. Okay, next we move on to 11.4, Superintendent Contract Extension. After reviewing the terms of the agreement with legal counsel, the board has determined that a separate action addressing the contract duration is unnecessary, as the contract is self-renewing. Accordingly, no board action is required on the item. So now we'll move on to 14.5, which is proposed new board policies. 4119.2, 4219.24, 4319.24, maintaining appropriate adult student interactions. So if you could pull that one up. Just the text, I think, so the public can see the text. No, I think the text itself. If you could just scroll up. Yes, thank you. I assume the board has read this. I could read it out loud if the board wants to hear it out loud, or we could consider a vote.
This is
Okay.
new, correct? That,
Yes,
and we have to have this by CSBA.
Since-
July.
Yeah.
Yes.
The state.
Yes, by July 1, we have to have it by the state. So it's recommended that we waive a first and second reading and vote on it now.
I also want to point out that it has to appear 3 places because of the way the board policies are. There's one section for classified, one for unclassified, and one for pardon? Management. And so it's the same policy. It's just appears 3 places, which my opinion would be they should restructure the way they do that, but it's not mine to say right now. So I would move that we approve this new policy as CSBA presented it.
Okay, moved by Catherine,
I'll second.
seconded by Vadim. Do we have any discussion before we consider a vote? Okay, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's 5-0. Okay, so next we'll move on to board committee assignments review. Yes, so you can.
It was requested last meeting to review the committee assignments and make revisions if necessary. That was a consensus of the board. So as you can see by the attachment, these are the current committee assignments.
Except for the last one, which is
The
on.
last one is the new one for this year. That is the Active Transportation Advisory Committee, ATP AC. That is a City of Mountain View committee.
Well, what do you mean by new this year? It hasn't
Well,
voted on yet.
It was a committee. We added that to our list based upon previous membership. This committee has been around, according to the website, at least the Active Transportation Plan, I believe, since 2023. In looking at the committee, there are members from school districts and other various community organizations that can speak to that. Mike did some research today about the committee, and it does say representation from MVLA, CSA, and other community organizations. So
Um, um, I have a statement to read about it, but I do have a question about what you just said. That is, CSA is not a elected position. I mean, they're another board, but they're not elected by the public. How many other groups elected by the public are on that committee?
I'm not
Okay,
Sure.
that's not, let me read my statement and then you'll see what I mean. Okay. As I reviewed this year's board assignments, I want to share some context and concerns. In my 8 years on this board, it has always been our practice to carry forward prior assignments onto the annual list year after year. While some committees do come and go, consistent practice has been to include them each year and make a deliberate decision to continue or discontinue them. Many school boards maintain, for instance, standing committees such as facilities and board policy committees. MVLA has had these in the past, though we chose not to continue them this year. Similarly, during the period when significant housing development was planned near 101, including projects by Google and others, we assigned a board member each year to work with the superintendent in the city on that effort. And for ongoing organizational assignments such as our JPA with CHAC, Phil Falaise was assigned year after year, and that assignment appeared on our list each year as it should. If we assign Theta to the City Transportation Committee in 2023, it should have continued to appear on subsequent assignment lists if the board chose to do so. That is my main point. I also have a philosophical and conflict of interest concerned about assigning board members to city committees. For context, for instance, nonprofits such as Community Services, which Mike just mentioned, or you did, does not permit elected officials to sit on their boards. Mayor Emily Ramos was required to step down from that board when she became a city council member. I believe similar concerns apply when board members are assigned to city committees, and I think this deserves consideration. Finally, I want to raise a separate but important concern about a letter sent by a board member without consultation review by the full board, yet signed with a title as an MVLA board member. This is a violation of our protocol. Any letter or communication sent to an outside organization that carries a board member's title must be reviewed by the board. As it was acknowledged in the email accompanying the letter, it was not reviewed by the board. Therefore, the board title should not have appeared. I raise these points not to be critical of any individual, but to reinforce our governance practices and protect the integrity of it as a board. So further, I do not have a problem with us reappointing you at this time, but you were not on the list at the beginning of the year, and it then just appeared magically. And it wasn't on the list last year. So the newer board members were not aware it even existed.
All right, so I have a statement. This chronology spans 3 years, so please bear with me. City staff requested in 2023 that I serve on the City of Mountain View's Active Transportation Public Advisory Committee, or ATPAC, for a 3-year term. Because I am an MVLA trustee, I could only serve in that capacity. The board elected me in 2023 as MVLA's representative. The assignment was made mid-year. ATPAC met in 2023, 2024, and 2025. After each meeting, I reported back to the board during board reports, which is how trustees typically provide updates on committee assignments. These reports included information that ATPAC was seeking student representation, and an MVLA student subsequently joined ATPAC. ATPAC then stopped meeting due to city staffing changes and therefore was not included in the board's regular December committee assignments. On March 24th, city staff informed me that ATPAC would be meeting again. The next board report was on May 4th. During that report, I informed the board that ATPAC had resumed meeting. I was reported that city staff had presented a draft active transportation plan to ATPAC, and that I intended to email letters to city staff and the Council Transportation Committee, CTC, in my capacity as an ATPAC member. I stated that a letter to CTC would become public record and I would provide it to the board. I also offered to bring board assignments back as an agenda item and to instead agendize my letter as a board letter. On June 5th, I sent a letter to CTC and copied the board. In the email, I stated that I had been elected by the board to serve on ATPAC and represent MVLA, and the letter had not been reviewed by the board and represented my comments as MVLA's ATPAC representative. I signed the letter as trustee, MVLA High School District, and member, Active Transportation Plan Public Advisory Committee. In my June 8th board report, I updated the board on what I had done. In addition, MVLA publishes board briefs on Parent Square, summarizing board reports and other meeting information. And the May 4th board brief listed ATPAC among the committees discussed during board reports.
I want to say that it did, but it did not say because it had been elected this year for you to sit on it. We realized you were on it, but we did not realize that it was a board assignment anymore because it wasn't on our list. That is the disconnect here. There's nothing inherently wrong except we're not reviewing it. And there was no time that I realized that you brought it back and asked, did we want to review the board assignments? And did we want to review the letter? I never heard that. I listened to that transcript more than once. So I was thinking, well, fine, write a letter. And the letter in itself is fine. It's just that we hadn't said you were sending it as part of our committee because we didn't realize you were still in the committee. And the two new members did not know you were on the committee to start with. So it's just a disconnect and a lack of transparency that we didn't do things in the right order and follow the right protocol. That's all. I'm willing to now say, please go ahead and be on that committee, but then we should review the letter after the fact.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You mentioned that committee requested you to serve in 2023.
Correct, yes, and I was elected to serve a 3-year term
Is it?
By them or by us?
by you.
And
by the
they,
board, yes.
but they elect you too, or they just appoint? I don't know how that committee works.
It's just a city staff committee, so they asked me to serve and I came to the board and I asked the board if I could serve as an MVLA trustee in 2023. They also asked me to serve a 3-year term because that was the length of the committee. And so I asked the board if I could serve in that capacity for 3 years. So
My question is it common or customary or even appropriate for outside committee to request a specific trustee to serve? I know we've voted and you've been approved, so I think the board decided, but it sounds strange that a committee
Right.
would request a specific board member rather than reaching out to the board itself, saying you would like a representative. You choose who you think is more appropriate. Is that?
My opinion is that if you're going to do that, you should. And I think it's a conflict of interest to sit on the committee for another elected entity, like a city. Unless it's,
That was my second question. I didn't quite get that. What's the conflict of interest?
well, because the city council is elected also, and we're elected, so anyway. Oh, but I agree with you from your other, even not counting that point, if you disagree with it, is that if the board discussed among itself who on this board has a lot of expertise and input on transportation issues, it may or may not be a certain person. And it may change as the board changes. And
No, I'm in full agreement that we should review every committee assignment every year to allow members of the board to volunteer, express interest, etc. So we can fix this right now and move on to make it efficient. So
Yeah, I think in a way,
I-
like some other things we've done this year, things have kind of happened after the fact.
Yeah.
And it's sort of part of the activity has already happened, and it's in our best interest to simply make it official and move on. But I do think it raises some concerns for next year to make sure we have absolutely everything that anybody would be on to be approved by the board together in December.
Catherine, just to understand, because I think you're raising two different things, like having full transparency about the list, which I follow.
Mhm.
The second is whether this should even be on the list.
Well, yes, but I
Because-
think it's kind of too late for that. So I think we should,
But
as Vadim said, we need to address that next year.
sure, but I just want to understand your logic. You're questioning whether it should even be on the list because as an elected official, no one board member should be speaking on behalf of the whole board within an elected body,
Right. Well,
an entity.
with it for another entity, yeah. But we have a whole 6 months until the organizational meeting in December
Mhm.
to think about that whole concept or not. And for now, I'd really rather just move on and vote to update the list, but have expressed my concerns about the protocol and the possibility for the future. That's
Mhm.
all.
let me ask you, would you like to be considered to represent MVLA on this committee?
Not at this point. I mean, her term will be up at the end of this year anyway.
Okay.
If that we have it at next year, maybe. I know a lot about this area now.
Okay.
Or
Just
because I have relatives that are in this area now.
so what are we working on?
I already said I was happy to, all right, I'll make a motion that we go ahead and after the fact add revise the list to add the ATP committee to our board committee assignments and assign Theta as the rep.
So if I can make a friendly amendment, it's actually called ATPAC. That is the official name. So I just want to, since we're being very
Okay,
clear.
because it doesn't spell it quite. that
Yeah,
way.
so so the full name, I repeated it, but I will say it again. It's called the Active Transportation Public Advisory Committee. And I also wanted to repeat that it is a city staff committee. It is not a elected body committee. So.
Somebody, did you
Yeah.
second it? Did somebody second it?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Hi.
Okay, we're gonna move on then to board operations. So do I have any board suggestions for future board reports or meetings?
No, I already just asked for, and I guess I can get it off the website, a copy of the the AI plan for the staff.
Okay,
Manual, you call it the manual.
okay,
Sure.
okay. Anyone else?
I have suggestion for board members, actually. If you request some data, not a question answer from administration, that the public then, administration shares a response to all the board members without specifying who requested. But if you just ask for data, please try your best to do this before the weekend. For folks that work full time right before coming to this meeting, we have no time to process the data and analyze it in order to be effective participants in the discussion, if that data is helpful to discussion. Again, I know sometimes we all realize that we want some information and it just happens and we ask and we are provided with this information. Just do recognize that a weekend can give us opportunity to review the data, like all of us, hopefully, significantly better than, even 6 hours during daytime on Monday, which is unrealistic if you're busy with, day jobs.
So you mean staff? If staff could give us the data before the
Well, we
weekend?
need to ask, right? So if one of us asks for the data, let's say Monday morning, and the staff obliges it, and the data is useful in order to empower the rest of the board to be effective at participating in the discussion, like, collaborating with, members of administration who are presenting, right? Then we may not be in a position to have reviewed this, which will make some of us less effective. So again, this is just an ask, right? Please try to think of what are the things that I would like to have data-wise for the meeting on Thursday, Friday, preferably Friday morning, so that the administration also can provide this data before the weekend. I want them to also have a weekend that's a real weekend rather than a work weekend. But anyway, just
So you're
Okay.
talking about us
Uh,
asking.
this is a
not
just for us.
them ask
No.
us, them giving it to us, but
Right.
us
No.
asking.
Okay.
it.
no.
So just to be clear, you're asking board members to ask earlier in the week.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, anyone else?
If I could, I thank you for that. I do want to clarify that I probably should have told you when I sent that link on to you. I didn't want to send it to you on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday morning. I got it at I got it immediately after I requested it from Terry. I didn't see it until Saturday morning. I didn't want to send it out Saturday morning. The board member that requested that information said that they noted that the information in the surveys were in the LCAP presentation. They were just curious. It was not meant to be information that was germane to approval of that item. So they were not requesting staff to get it back immediately for the board agenda item. I just tried to get it to you guys as soon as possible because there was a curiosity and I had it and I wanted to get it. So the board member was not being unreasonable with the data request. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay, so just to follow that, I think if that is the case, I think it would be important to include I don't think it violates any Brown Act to simply say that trustee requested that information, and you can pass on information as a superintendent.
Right.
If the trustee feels it is not germane to the agenda item, because I think in general, I think the assumption is when we get information and the agenda item is on the agenda, that it's germane to what we're going to discuss. And in fact, if we're talking about the LCAP survey data, I don't know what we're talking about. We did actually talk about it during the board meeting, so I don't actually know since, but in any case, I think there needs to be clarity around that because it sounds like it's a little bit unclear to me what actually happened. So, all right. So anyone else? Okay, all right. So moving on, we'll move on to communication/correspondence.
None tonight.
Okay, moving on to legislative updates?
The only legislative update I had was what Mike talked about regarding the budget. Today, the legislature was due to vote in order for them to get paid by the end of the month. It's now up to the governor to sign it by June 30th and work out whatever deals he's going to make with the legislature. The biggest issue is there is still $3.9 billion of revenue and projected Prop 98 funds that he is not allocating to schools. And he's saying, well, we might not get it. However, right now the projections are that we will. And it is pretty interesting that Prop 98 is mandate by the voters, and we're supposed to get the money. So we've seen a lot of different machinations of Prop 98 over the last couple of years as recession insurance. So, and then the only other thing in term, it's not necessarily a legislative update, it's a court update. Mike was talking earlier about our school facility program funds. There is actually a court case to halt the disbursement of those funds until the court can rule on the equity of those funds based upon school districts. School districts that have really, really large bonds are due to receive more money because they're able to modernize more. They're able to create more housing for students, potentially have more CTE programs. All of those three things generate monies for school districts. So the more money you have in a bond, the higher your bonding capacity, the more money you'll receive. And they are, that is now in the courts. Obviously, from last week, they were not successful in halting the flow of money to all districts. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next meeting is August 3rd, 2026, the district office boardroom. Okay, and now I think we can adjourn to take a bio break.
And we're going to adjourn to closed session again.
Yeah. Okay. But first, if we could get a bio break, that would be great. All right, okay, thank you.
So that we ended this part at what time?
So.
Okay.